Well, surveys like the Scottish Social Attitudes Survey and the British Social Attitudes Survey give us some interesting insights into just how complex public opinion really is. It's not as simple as people being for or against migration.
Yeah, the surveys show that while most people might support reducing overall migration, they also differentiate between types of migrants.
Right, there's often more acceptance towards skilled workers and students, while there might be more concern about those who are seen as low skilled or seeking asylum.
So it's almost like people are weighing those potential costs and benefits. And it's interesting that data suggests that people here in Scotland tend to be more positive about migration compared to the rest of the UK.
That is a great observation. Perhaps it's because Scotland has this history of being a nation of migrants itself, with a strong diaspora around the world. Maybe that historical context is playing a role in how people view things here.
It really makes you realize that attitudes are formed by a whole mix of factors, like personal experiences, the diversity of our neighborhoods, even our exposure to different cultures and our own family histories.
Absolutely. But we also can't ignore the influence of political narratives. Take this leaflet we have here from Patriotic Alternative. They're painting a much different picture of migration, focusing on those negative impacts and appealing to those who feel threatened by cultural change.
They're making some pretty strong claims
Hmm.
about things like mass immigration eroding British identity and straining public services and driving down wages.
It's important to approach these claims with a critical eye, though, to really look at the evidence they're using and consider any potential biases they might have.
Yeah, exactly. When you encounter information about migration, whether it's from the news, political groups, or even just anecdotes you hear from people, how do you actually evaluate its accuracy? Do you try to seek out different perspectives? Do you question the source?
Those critical thinking skills are really essential, especially in a world where we're constantly being bombarded with information, both accurate and misleading. It's about becoming informed citizens who can actually participate in these discussions thoughtfully and constructively.
And remembering that behind all the statistics and the political debates are real people with real lives.
Right. As we kind of continue unpacking this complex issue, let's try to keep that human element in mind. Because the impact of migration isn't just about numbers and trends. It's about how we choose to live together, how we build our communities, and how we shape the future of Scotland.
That's a great point. And speaking of shaping the future, we can't ignore the role of government policies in all of this.
You're absolutely right. Governments have a big influence on migration patterns through things like border control, regulations, even access to services and benefits. For example, the Scottish government's economic strategy emphasizes this international outlook, and it actually sees population growth as key to economic growth. So they're open to things like trade, migration, and new ideas.
But that's pretty different from what we're seeing from the UK government, which has actually implemented much stricter immigration controls since Brexit.
Yeah, this difference in approach really highlights that complex reality of governing a nation within a larger political entity. It raises questions about who actually has the authority to make these decisions about migration, what priorities are driving those decisions, and how different parts of the UK are being impacted.
And it really underscores that this isn't just a Scottish issue. It's a global phenomenon with consequences that reach far and wide.
Absolutely. It really requires international cooperation, a recognition of those shared challenges, and a commitment to finding solutions that benefit both sending and receiving countries.
Okay, so as we start to wrap up our deep dive into the impact of migration on Scotland, what are some of those key takeaways we can reflect on?
Well, firstly, migration is undoubtedly complex. It presents both challenges and opportunities.
And secondly, understanding the evidence, recognizing those biases, and really engaging in critical thinking are essential for navigating this complex landscape.
And finally, the future of migration in Scotland will be shaped by the decisions we make, as individuals, as communities, and as policymakers. So what role do you want to play in shaping that future?
If you're interested in learning more, we encourage you to check out the full reports and studies we've been discussing today. You can also look into organizations like the Migration Advisory Committee, GramNet, and the Scottish Fiscal Commission.
There's a ton of information out there,
Yeah.
and empowering yourself with knowledge.
You know, as we've been talking about all these complex issues, one thing that keeps coming back to me is that sense of uncertainty about the future. I mean, we talked about Scotland's projected population decline. But what if things change? What if Scotland actually becomes a more attractive place for migrants?
That's a really interesting thought. You know, a lot of the sources we looked at focused on the current trends and the challenges, but there's definitely another side to think about. What if increased migration could actually help reverse that population decline, maybe even give the economy a boost and revitalize some of those rural communities.
It's like flipping that puzzle piece over and seeing a whole new image, right? And there's actually a real-world example. From the early 2000s, about the influx of Polish migrants. It definitely had its challenges, but it also brought new energy and diversity to many parts of Scotland.
Absolutely. And there was even a report to the Scottish government in 2010 that highlighted a case where housing in an area that was considered undesirable was offered to migrants who arrived after that 2004 EU enlargement. And it actually led to regeneration and economic growth in that area. It just shows how migration can be a catalyst for positive change.
That's a really great example. But, of course, we can't just assume that positive outcome will always happen. It takes planning and real effort to make sure that both the migrants and the existing communities benefit.
You're absolutely right. It's about creating those win-win situations, investing in things like language support, skills training, even cultural exchange programs. All of that can really help smooth the path to integration. And we need to address those concerns about things like housing, healthcare, job opportunities to make sure that everyone feels valued and supported.
Right? It's about creating that welcoming environment where everyone can thrive. And that also means tackling those negative perceptions and really promoting those positive public attitudes towards migration. We have to counter misinformation, celebrate the richness that diversity brings, and really highlight all the ways that migrants contribute to our society.
I agree. It's about shifting that narrative from one of fear and competition to one of collaboration and shared prosperity. Scotland has a long and proud history of welcoming people from all over the world, and that tradition can be a real source of strength as we navigate these complexities of a changing world.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's safe to say that migration is a complex issue, with both challenges and opportunities.
Absolutely. It's not about simple answers. It's about having those informed and respectful dialogues, advocating for policies that reflect our values, and ultimately building a future where everyone has the chance to thrive, no matter where they come from.
We've covered a lot today, but this is really just the start of the conversation. We encourage you to keep learning about these issues, keep asking questions, and keep engaging in this really important dialogue. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about these forces that are shaping our world, the better prepared we'll be to make those informed choices and create a brighter future for ourselves and for generations to come.